Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is in their right element to listen to today's discussion. No? So, me, Anita Bakang, and the rest of the Group 7, we will be discussing the concept of hearing impairment. According to Helen Keller, who was deaf and blind herself, she described the problems of deafness as a deeper and more complex situation. It is a much worse misfortune, for it means the loss of the most vital stimulus, the sound of the human voice. The sound of the human voice, as we all know, brings language, sets thoughts astir, and keeps us in the company of men. Before we delve into the complexities of hearing impairment, we must first define what hearing impairment is. Hearing impairment is not simply an inability to hear or to communicate through speech. The most devastating effect of deafness is the deprivation of language. A hearing person acquires complex linguistic system of his or her culture as part of normal growth and development in the spontaneous, effortless, and natural manner. But unfortunate to say, we cannot say the same about deaf people. Hearing impairment also refers to the reduced function or loss of the normal function of a hearing mechanism. The impairment or disability limits the person's sensitivity to tasks like listening, understanding speech, and speaking in the same way those persons with normal hearing do. Hearing impairment itself is mistakenly attributed to sub-average intellectual capacity, speech defect, inattention, and other learning problems. Next, deafness. A person who is deaf cannot use hearing to understand, listen to speech rather, and communicate orally without special adaptations mainly in the visual mode. While a hearing aid amplifies sounds by increasing volume to make sounds louder, a person who is deaf, on the other hand, cannot understand speech through ears alone. He or she may be able to perceive some sounds, but his or her sense of hearing is not enough or non-functional in that sense for the ordinary purpose in life. Speech, as you all know, is accompanied for visually perceived actions like gestures, signs, and facial expressions. Deafness, on the other hand, also adversely affects educational performance because of the sheer difficulty in processing linguistic information through hearing, may it be with or without amplification. Hearing or deafness is not the same as mental retardation. It is not the same as speech and language disorders or learning disabilities in itself. A person who is hard of hearing has a significant loss of hearing sensitivity, but she or he can hear sounds, respond to speech, and other auditory stimuli with or without the use of a hearing aid. He or she is more likely a hearing person than one who is deaf because both of them use audition or listening to auditory stimuli in the environment, unlike a deaf person who relies more on visual stimuli. According to the age of onset, hearing impairment can be, first, congenital, which means when the condition is present at birth, or adventitious, when it is acquired after birth or later on. We also have bilingual, who is a type of deafness, is when the condition occurs before the child learns to talk. Postlingual deafness is when it is acquired after the child has learned speech, usually at the age of 2. So next we have the basic concepts on hearing impairment. The two main categories of hearing impairment are deafness and hard of hearing. The second one, the causes of etiology or deafness are traced to genetic or hereditary factors, developmental abnormalities during the prenatal stage, infections, environmental factors, and traumatic events. Hearing loss affects language development that in turn leads to delays in cognitive, social, and emotional development. Differences and variations in etiology, the onset or beginning of deafness, the degree and type of hearing loss, as well as family and educational situations, result in a widely diverse population of persons with hearing impairment. Hearing impairment is classified according to the part of the ear where the defect is, the age of onset, the stage of language development at the time of onset, and a degree of hearing impairment. Deaf with a capital D refers to those individuals who want to be identified with a deaf culture. The degree of hearing loss and the psychosocial impact of deafness affect cognitive and socio-emotional development as well as the ability to learn. So in today's society, this is very rampant jud because students who are deaf, which is kanang incorporate ba sila sa mainstream in that sense, maafektan gid ang ilahang cognitive and ilahang psychosocial development because again bullying is still a rampant issue even right now, even if na yung mga laws gonna prevent of bullying ganun and such. Next, the assessment of procedures include hearing evaluation, tests of mental ability, tests of communication skills, and psychosocial evaluation. The types of educational placement include full or partial mainstreaming in regular classes, self-contained classes in the resource room, or special education center of a regular school enrollment in a special school or a residential school. Special education also covers a wide range of educational approaches and strategies that focus on the development of speech, language, and communication skills. So, special education covers deafness and hearing impairment as well, in light with other development of speech, language, and communication skills. So, hearing aids and other assistive listening devices facilitate the acquisition of communication skills. So, students who have access to social services can get hearing aids and other assistive listening devices to facilitate their communication skills and as well as help in their learning journey. Mainstreaming in a regular class considers acceptance of deaf students by their hearing classmates, teachers, and staffs of the school, use of amplification devices, increased use of visual information, putting down noise levels, and preferential seating. So, mainstreaming also in a regular class considers acceptance of deaf students, may they be mildly deaf or fully deaf. There are special education services that covers their hearing devices, which is an example of this is an amplification devices, which is a hearing aid. Staffs of the school that know sign language. The increased use also of visual information, putting down noise levels again, and the preferential seating. So we have deaf students who are prefer to sit rather at the front rather than the back for more immersion on the lesson. So next we have a little story about a girl with hearing impairment. The following vignette illustrates that early intervention and special education significantly reduce the effects of deafness in the life of a young girl. Elsa is a pretty 6 years old grade 1 pupil who is deaf. She studies in a regular school where she is well accepted by her teachers, schoolmates, and the school staff. She wears a hearing aid that helps her understand the class discussion. Her teachers often call on her to recite, which she does with labored speech and sometimes not so intelligible speech. A special education teacher teaches her the skills that students who are deaf like her need to acquire. Elsa does well in all the subjects and gets high grades. She studies diligently and she behaves well in class. Despite her imperfect speech, her classmates like her. They pay attention to what Elsa says. In fact, they find it so exciting to have a classmate who has special needs. Following the guidelines on mainstream education for students with disabilities that the teacher explained to them earlier, everybody faces Elsa when they talk to her in natural voices and gestures. A number of them even have started learning the sign language with Elsa as the teacher. Her hearing aid does not bother them. They understand why Elsa always gets the front seat. At times, Elsa even asks her seatmates a lot of questions to learn the lessons very well and to understand what is going on. Elsa's medical record shows that she contracted meningitis when she was 6 months old rather. Meningitis is an inflammation of the members covering the brain and spinal cord. It can cause blindness, deafness, or mental retardation. Elsa had high fever and convulsion that required 2 weeks of hospitalization. Before she got sick, Elsa could produce babbling sounds and responded to the adults' quote unquote conversation with her. When she recovered from the disease, their prelingual speech diminished and Elsa was not bothered by loud sounds around her at all. She did not react to auditory stimuli coming from the radio and TV shows, boisterous laughter and noise from around her environment. The otologist or ear specialist patiently explained to the mother that meningitis had affected the inner part of the ear that is connected to the brain where hearing takes place. This condition caused Elsa to lose her hearing. The otologist informed Elsa's mother about special education and how it can help Elsa get an education like normal children. At the age of 4, Elsa was enrolled in the early intervention program of the Philippines School for the Deaf in Pasay City. She was fitted with hearing aids every day, which she eventually got used to wearing. A smart girl, she acquired speech through the oral mode together with the sign language. At present, she attends a regular elementary school where she is mainstreamed in grade 1. The school's special education teacher works closely with the regular teachers so that Elsa can participate in all of the activities. Before and after classes, the special education teacher teaches Elsa the special skills and tutors her on the lesson taken up in the class. Elsa's parents instead extend their utmost cooperation with the school to achieve the goals and objectives written in the girl's Individualized Education Plan or IEP. When they think of their futures of their daughter's future, they get the feeling and assurance that Elsa can finish basic education, go on to college, and be a normal and self-sufficient individual. Grasp Judna's story ni Elsa. In a world that is predominantly reliant on verbal communication, the notion of being deaf may be perceived as a hindrance to learning. In my perspective, that is not true at all. However, it is important to recognize that being deaf does not impede an individual's ability to acquire knowledge. It doesn't even impede also their ability to excel academically. In fact, deafness presents us the unique opportunities for personal growth. It can foster resilience, adaptability, and it can offer alternative modes of communication. By embracing the sound of silence, individuals with hearing impairments can transcend the barriers often associated with their disability. They can go over beyond what is perceived of them. They can discover a world of learning possibilities. In this sense, also, we can first-handedly witness the power of visual learning. Deafness compels individuals to tap into the power of visual learning to perceive things in a more vast manner, in a wider manner. It can also provide deaf people the assurance of learning things without the exception of them being subjected only to their disabilities. Like dili sila bitaw subjected only onto their disabilities na kanang it's such a bummer na kay disabilities nga you're so intelligent man unta. Like you need to, as future aspirants or as aspirant teachers, we should be able to kanang incorporate bitaw all the assistive devices and use that to the extent to help our students achieve and receive what they deserve, which is quality education. So as a CRM Shan at heart, again, our motto is quality education is our premium. And so giving the students that whatever disability they may have, whether you're teaching a full mainstream class or a partially mainstream class, we should be equally treating all our students. We should be treating our deaf students, our blind students, our students with learning disabilities the same way that we treat our regular students, so we should be treating them the way they deserve to be treated. That is all. I will be giving the floor next to Ms. Tugdang.
The anatomy and physiology of the human ear. Audition is the act or sense of hearing. The ear is one of two lead sense organs that allows people to gather auditory stimuli and information from near and far sources in the environment that come in the form of acoustic energy. Audition transforms acoustic energy into a form called mechanical energy and finally into a neutral energy or nerve impulses that can be interpreted by the brain. Neutral energy is called language of the brain. The anatomy and physiology of the hearing mechanism, the parts and functions of the ear, and the process of audition provide the base for understanding the nature of hearing impairment and its implications to the teaching-learning process. There are three main parts of the ear. First is the external or outer ear. The external ear, called the auricle or pinna, directs the sounds into the auditory canal or external acoustic meatus. When sounds enter the external acoustic meatus, they are slightly louder or amplified as they are directed toward the middle ear. Second is middle ear. Sounds enter the middle ear through the eustachian tube and pass through the tympanic membrane or eardrum. The eardrum moves in and out in response to changes in sound pressure. The movements of the eardrum change the acoustic energy into mechanical energy, which is transferred to the three smallest bones in the body, the ossicles or ossicular chain, composed of the melus or hammer, encus or anvil, and tapes or stirrup. The foot plate or base of the tapes rest in an opening called the oval window, the path through which mechanical enters the inner ear. The vibration of the ossicles transmits the mechanical energy from the middle ear to the inner ear with little loss. The third is the inner ear. This is the most complex and sensitive part of the entire hearing apparatus. The inner ear is covered by the temporal bone, the hardest bone in the body. The cochlea is the main receptor organ for hearing and contains two fluid-filled cavities and the organ of corte. The cochlea looks like a coiled shell of a snail. The vibrations stimulate the approximately 20,000 tiny hair cells to transform the mechanical energy into electrical nerve impulses or neutral energy. These impulses are transmitted along the auditory nerve through the central nervous system pathways to the brain, where the auditory experience is processed and understood. The semicircular canals in the inner ear control the sense of balance.